If someone says tell me a joke, what is the first joke you tell them? 3 engineers are on a road trip, a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer, and a software engineer. They pull over at a restaurant to eat, and when they try to leave, the car won't start. The mechanical engineer says let me check the starter. The electrical engineer says let me make sure the battery is connected. Always try the easiest solutions first. The software engineer rolls his eyes and says before we do anything else, let's all just get out of the car and then get back in. An infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. Bartender asks, what can I get you guys? First mathematician says I'd like a pint of beer please. The second one says I just want a half a pint. The third one says a quarter pint. The bartender listens for a while and then stops them. He pours out 2 pints and says you guys really ought to know your limits. A guy walks into a bar with his dog. He orders 2 beers, his dog sips one and starts talking to the people at the bar. Everyone's really enjoying the dog. He tells them story after story of his life and has his audience captivated. The barman's really impressed by this. He asks the owner if the dog's for sale. The owner thinks for a minute, then tells the barman, you can have him for $25. The barman almost falls over backwards. $25 for a talking dog? How can that be? The owner replies, because nothing he says is true. A man walks into a bar, and sits next to a woman sitting alone. Would you have sex with me for $1 million, he asks. Well sure, I guess I would. Okay, would you do it for $1,000? Yeah I guess. How about $5? What? No. What kind of woman do you think I am? We've already established what kind of woman you are, now we're just negotiating price. An American, an English, a Japanese, and a Chinese were on an airplane. Suddenly the pilot gets on the PA and says, we've run into some trouble. Unfortunately we've lost one of our engines and the other engine can't handle the weight of the plane. But we should be okay if we can lighten up by the weight of just one person. Is there any brave volunteer who would jump out to save the rest? So the English guy stands up and says, I'll do it. And he opens the door, yells, long live England, and jumps out. A few minutes later the plane is still going down, and the pilot gets on the PA. Regretfully the plane is still not recovering. We need another volunteer to jump out in order to save the rest. And so the American guy stands up and says, I'll do it. He opens the door to the plane, shouts, long live America, and jumps out. The plane seems to recover for a bit, but after a while they begin losing altitude again. The pilot again gets over the PA and asks for a final volunteer to help lighten the load on the plane. Finally the Chinese guy stands up and says, I'll do it. He opens the door to the plane, shouts, long live China, and throws the Japanese guy out. My uncle Albert worked for British Rail as a signalman for 25 years and he decided he wanted to finally take a step up the ladder. After speaking to a friend he settled on the head signalman job as his target and wrote off to British Rail with his request. 2 weeks later an assessor turns up in his signal box to give him a Q&A exam. Assessor, so Albert, what would you do if 2 trains were heading down the tracks towards each other? Albert, I would pull the line emergency signal, telling the trains to stop. Assessor, so what if the emergency lever was stuck? Albert, I would run outside and throw the emergency switch, bringing all the signals on the line to a stop. Assessor, what if the signal box was on fire and the external emergency switch had been struck by lightning and didn't operate? Albert, I would run down the road and get my Uncle John. Assessor, your Uncle John? Why? Albert, he's always wanted to see a train crash. A blind man decides to take his first trip to Texas. He boards the plane and takes his seat, and his feet don't even touch the floor, the seat is so large. He asks the flight attendant why his seat is so big, and she responds, "Everything is bigger in Texas." The plane touches down and the blind man takes a cab to his hotel. He decides to wet his whistle at the hotel bar and orders a beer. He goes to pick up the glass and it's so massive he has to use two hands and can still barely pick it up. He asks the bartender why the glass is so big, and the bartender responds, "Everything is bigger in Texas." The blind man enjoys his first beer and decides to order a second one. After two Texas-sized beers, he has to take a wicked piss. He asks the bartender where the restroom is. The bartender points him down the hallway and says, "It'll be the second door on your left." The blind man makes his way down the hallway, but he trips past the second door and goes in the third door, which leads to the pool. He walks straight ahead and falls into the water and starts screaming, "Don't flush! Don't flush!" A man is on a long journey by horseback when one day his horse suddenly dies. The man is in the middle of nowhere, but after a few hours of walking, he comes to a monastery. He asks a monk if he will sell him a horse. "Absolutely," says the monk, "but this horse has special commands. To go forward, say thank God, and to stop, say praise the Lord." "That seems simple enough," says the man, and he buys the horse and is on his way. "Thank God," he says, and the horse takes off at a brisk trot. After several miles the man notices a cliff looming on the horizon. "Whoa!" he cries, but the horse continues straight ahead at full speed. The terrified man finally remembers the right words and yells, "Praise the Lord!" and the horse skids to a halt, inches from the precipice. The man breathes a sigh of relief and says thank God. 3 men were stranded. Some natives picked them up and brought them to their leader. The leader says, "Every one of you, go and get me 2 fruit." The men run away. As the first comes back with a cherry and a grape, the leader says, "Now, put them in your butt. If you laugh, we will kill you." He tries to put the cherry in his butt, but he tickles and gets killed immediately. The second comes back, with a banana and an apple. The leader again says, "Now, put them in your butt. If you laugh, we will kill you." He starts with the banana and puts the whole thing in without any reaction. Right after, he starts with the apple. As the apple is half in, he starts to laugh very loud. In heaven, the second guy meets the first, which asked, "Man, you got the banana without any problem. Why did you laugh so hard with the apple?" The second replies, "I saw the third guy running towards me smiling with a pineapple and a watermelon. So a bus full of ugly people going to an ugly people support group crashes, and they all die. When they get to the afterlife, they are all given one wish before entering paradise. One by one, each of the ugly people wishes to be beautiful. Poof! They're absolutely drop-dead gorgeous upon entering. About halfway down the line, one of the ugliest guys starts smiling. He's letting people go in front of him, insisting he wants to be last. When it's finally his turn and all of the ugly people are now beautiful, he gets his one wish. Make 'em all ugly again. A blonde walks into a bank in New York City and asks for the loan officer. She says she's going to Europe for vacation for 2 weeks and needs to borrow $5,000. The bank officer says the bank will need some kind of collateral for the loan, so the blonde hands over the keys to a new Rolls-Royce. The car is parked on the street in front of the bank, she hears the title, and everything checks out. The bank agrees to accept the car as collateral for the loan. The bank's president and its officers all enjoy a good laugh at the blonde for using a $250,000 Rolls as collateral against a $5,000 loan. An employee of the bank then drives the Rolls into the bank's underground garage and parks it there. 2 weeks later, The blonde returns and repays the $5,000 and the interest, which comes to $15.41. The loan officer says, "Miss, we are very happy to have had your business, and this transaction has worked out very nicely, but we are a little puzzled. We checked you out and found that you are a multi-millionaire. What puzzles us is, why would you bother to borrow $5,000? The blonde replies, "Where else in New York City can I park my car for 2 weeks for only $15.41 and expect it to be there when I return?" The king had a beautiful daughter. One day, he said that the one who brings him the most ping pongs is going to marry his daughter. So the first guy came with a sack full of ping pongs. The king was pleased, that is very good. The second guy came with a truck full of ping pongs. The king was happy, "You have brought me the most ping pongs so far." The third guy came. He was bruised and had cuts all over his body. He brought a sack as well, bigger than the first guy's sack. So the king said, "I am sorry, but the guy before you brought more ping pongs than you did." "Ping pongs? I thought you said King Kong."